That's that.
You made it.
Daniel.
I was afraid I wasn't going to get to say goodbye.
Hey.
Hey, Mary. Hi.
Daniel's the guest of honor tonight.
Yes.
He's making a big adventure. You're actually leaving Sunday. Okay. Yeah, Sunday. You probably won't be.
Oh, yeah. Vacation.
long vacation.
Don't say permanent vacation.
People like Daniel don't take vacations. They're it's all has to do with this spirituality, and there's no time for fun like that. It's
Straight to enlightenment.
straight to enlightenment. Yeah. Just gentle and compassionate work all the time. Compassionate. So that answers your question. Yeah. Yes. So we'll discuss some more of that later. Tonight I wanted to. I thought about this when I was wandering. I was wandering around aimlessly in the living room over here, and I ran into this poster that was made 17 years ago, I think, something like that. This was something that really came to me in a meditation, and I thought, well, I should write this out, because I think it's interesting to me, and I think if people might find it interesting about how meditation affects us from a physicality or physical and mental, spiritual, and the scientific aspect of it, of meditation, how it affects us. I know it's hard to read from there, and it's even harder to read on the camera. But what I'll do is, if you'd like, just take a picture of this. If you find some relevance, is that the right word? Some importance, some relevance to what I'm going to be talking about here. Those of you that were here last week. If you weren't here, shame on you. But if you were here, that's right, you weren't here. My greatest follower wasn't here. So we talked about what we're calling on this chart the scientific aspect, and we were talking about the brainwaves, beta, alpha, theta, and delta, and how those brainwaves actually can be a part of our meditation, and they are a part of our meditation whether we know anything about them or not. Right now I'm conversing in beta brainwaves. Beta is the most prominent brainwave that I'm firing right now. If I would close my eyes, I would probably go into alpha pretty quickly. And beta is the area of the mind that finds the outer world more important and more believable, actually. And then as soon as we go into alpha, we start to realize that the most important aspect of who we are is inside. So the importance of the world is not that big of a deal. And even more so when we go into theta, the theta brainwaves. Theta are brainwaves that we might look at as far as when we start getting into hypnosis, or that area between, or right before we fall asleep at night, our eyes are closed, and we are one foot's in the world and one foot's in the non-world aspect, So right before we fall asleep, it's kind of like, if we work at it, we can kind of play with that area. And I actually like to do that, just kind of play in that area. Usually this girl here is talking, and I'm one foot is here and one foot is here, so I'm partially listening to what is happening, and partially in la la land. That's theta. Delta is usually looked at when we sleep. We don't have to be asleep to have delta brainwaves happening, but when we are sleeping, delta brainwaves are most prominent, and especially when we're in the realm or the deep sleep, when we are dreaming and that kind of thing. So these brainwaves are very important. If you want to kind of catch up on it, just check last week's meditation. We talked about it quite a bit when we started. But I wanted to talk a little bit about the spiritual aspect. That's the the one in the middle here. And so we have like 10 areas here, and then the bottom one is actually death. And these are really all considered levels of consciousness, if you will. It's ironic that you put out that you called them stages or of consciousness, different densities. And this is kind of like that. But when we are, this is the active brain wave, the really active mind, all the way down to when we are asleep, and all actually when the body has passed, when we're in a different realm altogether, when we have died, what we call death. But what I decided to use, this was made so many years ago. This was my business card, a pretty big business card. But what I used to do is keep these in my car, and I didn't have business cards. I was a meditation teacher and fairly new in the area. And then whenever somebody was interested in what I was doing, I would go out in my car and grab one of these posters. I had them all rolled up, and I'd give them a poster. Or I would go to a yoga studio and take some of these with me and give them to the person at the counter, and say, if you have some meditation teachers, give them one of these. Or if you're interested in meditation, so I would hand them out to people, and so it was really a business card of mine. It's funny. World's biggest business card. When I put this together, I was thinking in the area of the 7 factors of awakening, or 7 factors of enlightenment, from the Theravada Buddhist tradition. And this is talked about in like the 7th step of the Eightfold Path. For some of you that are in the course that I'm teaching over at the temple. So we have the very first, so there's 7 areas of the 7 factors of enlightenment, but we have 10 areas and even death down here. So I had to kind of fill in the gaps in order to make it complete. But I know you can't see this, but the very first one is what is called defilement. There's a lot of fear, anger, and desire up here. The mind is. It's as if the mind doesn't have any desire in spirituality or in meditation or practice or anything like that. It's when we are kind of lost in the world, and we've all been there. It's not, sometimes if I would get angry or fearful or something like that, and it's like the spirituality just goes right out the window, and the mindfulness goes right out the window, and we're kind of thrust in the world, and we kind of lose grasp of everything that we've been working for, like if we are a consistent meditator. And so I called that defilement. I don't know if I can see that on the camera there, and then we moved down to recollection, and that is an area of uncertainty too, but this is actually the very first part of the 7 factors of enlightenment. And sometimes that's considered, one thing it's often called is investigation. And so we start to get acquainted with maybe our spiritual side, and we want to explore it a little bit more. And by the way, the reason I'm bringing this up is because I want us all to remember these when we do our meditation practice tonight. There's always a reason for bringing any of this stuff up before we meditate. And then we come down to inquiry, and this is also like a mindfulness. So the second factor of awakening, or second factor of enlightenment, is mindfulness itself. That we should be mindful in everything that we do. We can look at mindfulness as a byproduct of our meditation practice. We can look at mindfulness as being our practice itself, whether we're sitting in formal meditation or just being out in the world. We should always remember to be mindful. I almost said always strive to be mindful, but that's not really the right words, but always remind ourselves and remember to be mindful. And really that's all it takes. If we're not sure what mindfulness is, just ask ourselves, what emotion am I experiencing right now? So we start to take an immediate look inside, and that is a moment of mindfulness for us. We just ask. That's part of why it says inquiry on here, because we're actual doing self-inquiry to bring that mindfulness up to us and to actually remind ourselves what it's all about, what mindfulness is. And then number 3 down here, this is all of a sudden we're getting into alpha state, as far as the brain waves. And this is effort. Concentration on moving objects and physical sensations. So our meditation practice is on moving objects such as the breath, the movement of the breath that we feel. If we can, this is quite frankly where a lot of people do their meditation. They don't hold their attention on one solid, still area. Their mind usually has some movement to it. It's not that necessarily the right way to meditate, but it happens a lot where we're noticing the movement of the breath. We might notice the coming and going of thoughts, coming and going of moods and emotions, that kind of thing. So there's a lot of movement going on. When we get into deep concentration, there's very, very little movement. And it's not by design, it's just the nature of us and how meditation works for us. And life in general, too. When we become very still in the body and in the mind, we kind of have to be in a place, in mentally in the right place to be able to do that. And then we come down, there's a feeling of satisfaction in one's spiritual understanding and progress. Awareness and mindfulness and wisdom are the key words and the key actions in that. And this is like a deeper state of alpha. And what the definition of alpha that corresponds with that is effective relaxation, creative visualization, a state of being rather than of doing or having, of being, within the body. And we come down to rapture. This is sometimes called joy in the seven factors of enlightenment. Joy is different than happiness. There's more activity to it. Joy is an energetic kind of happiness that we can have. Joy is like anticipation of something that's wonderful that's going to happen. If we knew that we were going to be enlightened at the end of this meditation tonight, we would feel this joy. And it would be the kind of joy where we're just not kicked back and completely content. There would be a lot of, this is great, this is, energetic joy. And it's a part of awakening, and that has to be there because of the energy involved. It has to be energy in our meditation. There has to be energy in the waking up. And what it corresponds to is low alpha, like self-hypnosis, super learning, energy enhancing, and happiness. Super learning is like when we are very, very comfortable and the mind is not thinking about the past or the future, and it's just wide open. And so if somebody was reading to us, or if we're listening to an audio or something like that, we would be like that 3-year-old child. Our minds would be like a sponge. Because children are in alpha a lot, that alpha state. And they can learn 3 or 4 languages when they're like 3 or 4 years old without a problem. I can barely speak 1 language, let alone 3 or 4. And but if we can actually train ourselves to, increase our learning capabilities by understanding the level of alpha, alpha brainwaves that we're generating. But that's not exactly what we're trying to accomplish when we're meditating or from a spiritual standpoint. But that's also a state of a lot of insight. A lot of insight can come up for us. And then we go into tranquility, and this is another one of this is the fifth factor of enlightenment in the Buddhist 7 factors of enlightenment. One word that we can probably use with that tranquility is balance. Like everything is in balance. It's like when the Buddha discovered the middle way or started teaching the middle way. Not too much of this, not too much of that. Everything is even, so to speak. When the Buddha talked about the middle way, he used this teaching of a string very similar to a guitar, like a very early guitar, a stringed instrument that they would actually use gut. Ugh. And what else are they going to do? They didn't have string, And if it was too tight, it would break. It wouldn't be serving anybody. But if it was too loose, it wouldn't make music. It would just go blunk, blunk, blunk. And so if it's tuned just perfectly, then that's that perfect balance. That's that middle way, and it can be used as a musical instrument. In our case, our minds can be used, to function the way we want them to function, to have that flow and that that clarity of mind. That is something that we all want, through the practice of meditation, through our practice period. And that's deep theta, deep relaxation, deep meditation, increased memory, focus, creativity, paradoxal sleep, and oscillation between sleep and awake. That is sometimes looked at as stage 1 sleep. That oscillation, that 1 foot in, 1 foot out, right? That's when we get into theta, of right before we fall asleep. We can kind of rest in that. That is also what kind of the sleep yoga for Nidra. Yoga Nidra is practice in that state, hopefully. That's one of the goals. And then the 6th area of the 7 factors of enlightenment is concentration. And concentration is a control and focus, and it can be called samadhi. If we reach these deeper states of concentration are called jhanas. Sometimes it's called jhana. Mid-range theta. So we induce sleep, lucid dreaming, meditation when conscious, and it could be stage 2 sleep. So when we're sleeping, there's a great deal of these theta brainwaves firing, as well as delta. So concentration is very, very important in regard to our awakening, in regard to enlightenment, because it really shows us what is coming up ahead, and it really points to the idea that what is most important isn't out here. When we're very deeply concentrated, it is extremely blissful because the thoughts stop is in regard to the past and the future. And I'm talking about deep, deep states. The body, we're not concerned about our bodies or our kids or our past or future or our cats or any of this stuff. Had to throw that in there, right? And that's why, and in concentration is, I could go on and on about concentration because I was reading about it today, but when we come out of a deep concentration, it is mindfulness that reminds us how we got into that, and then we practice that again and again and again, and then we can get into deeper and deeper and deeper levels of concentration. Called jhanas, and there's actually 8 jhanas. But getting into the first jhana is a real accomplishment and just an incredible experience. And then we're looking at emptiness, or what is called ultimate reality, where everything is seen as a truth. This is like in parallel here. We go into delta, deep sleep, increased immune functions, hypnosis, stage 4 sleep, and getting into the realm sleep. Stage 4 and realm are the same thing. And oh, I'm sorry, I skipped one here. I went from concentration and I skipped the most important step. This is step 7 of the 7 factors of enlightenment, and it is indeed equanimity. That we find equanimity in everything. And so there's nothing that can take that away from us, that feeling of being of equanimity. It's the doorway to peace, stillness, and the end of anger, fear, and desire. When we're equanimous like that, there is none of the hindrances or none of the factors of fear, anger, or desire, what's often called hatred, fear, hatred, and delusion. It's just not existent. And then we look at emptiness, and at the very bottom here, when we overcome the identification with the body through meditation, we know that from direct experience that the body is not us. And this is in part why concentration is such a powerful practice for us. When we become concentrated, the body is no longer there. It's the same experience that we have when we are without the body and when we die, and we lose that fear of death altogether, because we have experienced it. We know what it's like through those deep states of concentration. Very, very low delta brainwave. Well, this is below delta, where brainwaves activity ceases. And so these spiritual factors, these 7 factors of enlightenment, are things that we should keep in mind. And actually, if we have a spiritual practice at all, without even realizing it, we are practicing these 7 factors. It's just it's what we're doing. We might not even know what the 7 factors are, but we are still practicing those. That's what we're hoping to achieve, whether it's conscious or subconscious. Sometimes we have no recollection of how deep this practice can take us, how far spirituality can take us in our lifetime, in the here and now. And it's very, very powerful stuff. We just have to be consistent and stay with it. And I think it does help to understand these 7 factors. So please keep these in mind when we're meditating. We'll start meditating here in a moment. Again, the factors are recollection, or inquiry, effort, rapture, tranquility, concentration, and equanimity. We want to be sure to just be mindful of all these things, and mindfulness is a part of every one of these areas. So there's some investigation, in our meditation. Then we have to apply a little bit of effort, and the effort that we apply is in the energy behind our practice. And following that is joy, and then there's this tranquility, and then we become concentrated. More concentrated we become, the more we notice the equanimity. Equanimity is a hallmark of concentration, where there are no hindrances to, and no difficulties for us at all. Any questions about that? Okay, I hope that helps. So we'll do about 30 minutes of meditation. I will speak a little bit. I'll guide us through a little bit. Otherwise, it'll be silent. And then afterwards, we'll have a little discussion and see where we're at. Please take a moment and thank yourself for being here. Thank yourself for making the journey. With the eyes closed and with a comfortable posture. Be mindful of the 7 factors of enlightenment. And even more so, be mindful of why we're doing these practices. Many of us feel that we don't have a desire to necessarily become enlightened, that's not a part of the practice. And there's some of us that feel as if that is a very important part. The Buddha assured us that every one of us will become enlightened. Maybe not necessarily as quickly as we would like, and sometimes quicker than we would like to, depending on how we make our way through life and whether we learn the lessons that we're supposed to learn. In other words, these karmic signals that we're supposed to understand. Once we receive them and we want to know what it's all about, we want to understand the meaning behind these things that happen to us, these actions of body and speech in the area of sounds. And the things that go through our mind. So to understand karma and how it affects us within our lives is a big part of our spiritual advancement and part of waking up. And many of us feel that there's no hurry, and that might be a very good way to look at it. Because once again, the Buddha said that we will become enlightened. He said it could happen as soon as 7 days, or 7 weeks, or 7 months, 7 years, or 7 lifetimes. He said, but we will all be there. And so these 7 factors of awakening were laid out by the Buddha, and something that we all have to go through to be mindful and to have this inquiry, this investigation. And then to be able to notice this joy that comes up, and to be able to practice meditation and enhance our concentration. And then finally, understanding and having this equanimity within us and living with this equanimity. Where there is no good or bad or right or wrong. It's an understanding that everything is in its place and everything is perfect just the way it is. It's a very difficult thing to see sometimes as humans. that there is a reason for everything. Because we like to control, we like to be in control. We don't want to settle for things just the way they are, and that's not necessarily what equanimity is. If something is the way that we wish it wasn't, and we feel as if there's something that can be done, equanimity doesn't mean that we should stop and not try to rectify things the way we see it as it should be. Because we are part of that equation too. And so in other words, if we feel as if we can bring something into balance, we should apply ourselves to do so. But we can even do that with a mind of equanimity. It takes a great deal of mindfulness, but it certainly can be done. And so in other words, we don't want to be attached to the outcome, because that's where the pain and suffering come. We apply ourselves. We use that skillful effort to see our world the way that we would like to see it, as long as it benefits others and ourselves. But we do not get attached to any of the outcomes. That attachment is the sticky suffering that we often realize, or should realize. So bring your attention to the breath. Use the breath as a guide. Find an area within the body where the breath, the movement of the breath is touching the skin, maybe the tip of the nose, something like this. Focus on that area. Relinquish the past. Give yourself the opportunity and give yourself permission to set aside the future. Don't worry about the past, and sit and relax in this presence. Focusing on the breath. See if you can get a feel for this equanimity. It's a perfect opportunity to do so. You're concentrated. You're focused. You've given yourself permission to not think about anything, and not to be concerned about the past or the future, and just rest in this presence. I would like to suggest that we actually dedicate this loving kindness sutra to Daniel, because I don't know how many people were here when we talked about it. Daniel's moving. He doesn't want to, but they're making him move away from us. I don't think that's exactly how it's working, but Daniel's moving to Santa Fe, New Mexico, and of course we wish you the best of luck, and I know it's going to be a really successful journey for you. Sounds cool, being there with your brother and everything, like a perfect opportunity. So if we could dedicate this to you. You're going to be here by yourself?
Leaving his sister for his brother, but
Well, maybe you can go visit. Yeah. You'll have to come here more often. We'll be your family. We'll be your family. But yeah, Daniel's showed a lot of loving kindness towards us and towards me and everybody in this meditation learning center community and at the temple and everything. And so we can do is share, at least we can share this loving kindness sutra and dedicate it towards Daniel and his journey. To attain the state of peace, one skilled in goodness should be able, upright, perfectly upright, gentle in speech, kind, and free from pride, contented, easily satisfied, with limited duties and unburdened livelihood, controlled in senses, discreet, reserved, and not blindly attached to groups. One should not commit the slightest wrong, that the wise might censor, wishing, may there be happiness and security, may all beings be happy. Whatever beings there are, whether feeble or strong, tall or short, large, medium or small, microscopic or mammoth, leaving none, seen or unseen, living near or far away, born or to be born, may all beings be happy. Let one not deceive another, nor despise anyone anywhere, neither in anger nor in ill will should one wish another harm. Just as a mother would risk her own life to protect her only child, even so, one should cultivate a limitless concern for all living beings. Extend loving kindness throughout the world without limitation, above, below, and across, free of obstruction, enmity, or hostility. Whether standing, walking, sitting, or lying down, one should diligently sustain this mindfulness. This is called sublime living. Without holding narrow views, but being endowed with broad vision and avoiding attachment to sense desires, the virtuous are not born again into this world. May each of us and all beings be well, happy, and peaceful. May no harm come to us. May no difficulties come to us. May we all meet with spiritual and worldly success. May we have the patience, the courage, and the understanding to meet and overcome any problems or any difficulties that we might face in life. And of course, we wish Daniel the best of luck in his adventure to come, your journey. Thank you. We don't normally allow food in this room. I don't know who brought food, but I did actually. Can you help with those? We're going to share some cookies if you eat cookies. And this is like to bring a festive mood. And I knew that if we brought the cookies out after we're done talking and everything, everybody would just grab one and go. So this way we can just kind of relax into it. I don't know if you want to grab napkins. Yeah, go ahead and get them. Anyway, so I hope this helped. With the 7 factors of enlightenment. This is actually one of the topics that we had last week in the course that we're doing on the Eightfold Path. And everything in Buddhism is numerical. I mean, there's numbers: the 4 Noble Truths, the 7 factors of enlightenment, the 10 perfections, the 10 hindrances, the 5 hindrances, and the 10 fetters, and on and on and on. So they're kind of put together like that, so they're easy to remember. It was really Ananda that put together the numeric system like that, and it's really very handy that he did so. So just try to keep those in mind, and if you want, like I said, take a picture of this when you leave, or look up the 7 factors of enlightenment when you get home. Look it up on Wikipedia or something, and I think it will actually help your practice. Any questions about any of that? Okay. Any questions about the cookies? What kind do you have?
There's a lot of cookies there.
Yeah. Take a napkin if you want, and no crumbs.
Suck them all out.
Yeesh. One of the things about the factors of enlightenment is that they have to be followed in order. So it's very interesting that one of the first areas is mindfulness, and one of the last areas is concentration, and finally equanimity. But it's very hard to be on this path and follow, follow the practices and stuff without mindfulness. So we really have to say that's one of the most important areas, one of the most important things. And as I mentioned before, a lot of people, the definition of mindfulness is very difficult. One word we can use is awareness, and that is being aware of everything that comes up for us, and being aware of our judgments or other people's judgments. And you can set them down, that's fine. And but it's more than that. It's actually being very, very careful and to notice our not only our judgments but our decisions and our commentary about something. So it's like seeing something for the very first time, like a child, seeing something and exploring the world for the first time without these overlaid ideas that we were taught. And it's not easy to do because we have been taught how to look at things and how to react to things in our belief system ever since we were just a small child. And so all these things are ground into us. It's kind of like discovering a new religion or something like that. It's like it seems very foreign to us. It's like the first time that we might have run across some of the ritual practices that people do for certain religions, and how these practices can help a person, and how they can get in the way of a person's progress. But to see people bow down to a statue, for example, and get up and then get down and actually do a prostration, actually bow down and put their forehead to the floor, and then get up and then do it again and again and again in front of the Buddha. These types of practices are very common in countries that are Buddhist, Buddhist countries where people are born into Buddhism. I was in South Korea one time, and I was just checking out the temples and the different, the different things that they did there. And I went into inside one of the temples where a lot of people were, and they're actually like holding what we would call a service in Christianity. And I had no idea what they were saying or anything like that, because I don't speak Korean. If you recall, I just barely speak English. So. And so I didn't know what was going on, and then they started doing these prostrations. And I thought, well, this is, I'll do this just for a few minutes. And they were prostrations where you stand. I can't even remember the motions, but it was more like a physical, like a heavy physical activity. And there were old ladies around me and older men and young people. And I thought, well, if they can do this, I can do this. But I soon learned that obviously they were trained, to do these prostrations, because it was really like a boot camp. And I was able to do it for, 15, 20 minutes. I don't really remember. And then I thought, this isn't going to work. They'll probably be doing this all day long. And they did do it for about an hour. I left, and I stayed in the area and looked at some different things that they had in that area, different statues and other parts of the temple. And I came back, and they were still doing these prostrations. And it seemed strange to me that this was their way of offering their respect to the Buddha or the Buddhist teachings or whatever they were doing. I didn't really know, but it had something to do, of course, with Buddhism. And usually when people are doing these rituals, they usually explain it as paying respect to the teachings, that the Buddha laid out for us. But it's just strange, so I had all these judgments and all these I was wondering, why are they doing this? And it was very, very hard to be mindful in that moment. I was the only Caucasian around, and I didn't know anything, and it was just a time of bewilderment, for me. But if I was able to, remember to be mindful, and that is a big part of mindfulness, to remember to do so. If I could remember to do it in times like that, it would just be no judgment. I would be going along with everything. I wouldn't, the commentary inside about why this is happening or why that's happening wouldn't be there. And I would, just really go along, for the journey for as long as I could. And there's a part of me that did that, but there was a part of me that did have a lot of questions too. A person might think, oh, that's normal, that's typical, but if we're absolutely mindful, mindfulness is very pure, it's very very much moral. There wouldn't be any looking at somebody from, thinking of them as being different, or even thinking of ourselves as being different in any way. Again, it's very much like a child, looking out in the world for the first time, just seeing everything anew, just like it's the first time seeing it. And the advantage of that is that we discover, we can have this inquiry, but we discover things for the very first time, things that we've never seen before. But mindfulness is a lot of memory to do it, and it's a lot of it points to morality for us, because there's no way that we could ever do anything to harm ourselves or harm anybody else if we're in the state of mindfulness, if you want to call it a state. And it is really the essence of Buddhism. Buddha was actually, if somebody's going to get a patent on mindfulness, it would be the Buddha. He called it sati, and sati is that keen awareness that we apply and must use during mindfulness. You want those to go around again?
Cookies, anyone?
Pass them around again. Those are in honor of Daniel. And Daniel can have as many as he wants, because he's actually taking them home with him. There's plenty. There's plenty. I made those myself. Now, was that mindful of me saying that?
Why is there a barcode on it?
Oh, well, barcode. That's my barcode.
Oh, you make the barcodes too?
Yeah.
And then taped them up so Terry could open them.
Authenticity.
I can tell.
Yeah. Any questions from anybody, or any commentary, anything that anybody would like to add?
You ever have like mindfulness regret? Like after something happens, you're like, God, I wish I would have handled that better. And then you spend like the next hour like thinking, man, I wish I would have been mindful in that moment. It's like I'm not.
It's a good question. It is regret, you know. I guess the word is regret for, you know, for. I think that happens to everybody to some extent. Usually, when you're trying to date somebody, that's when it happens. I wish I would have talked to her. She was right there, and I didn't say a word, you know, that kind of thing. But I don't know if that. Pardon me.
Delayed mindfulness.
Delayed mindfulness. Yeah, I don't know if that would play in the area of mindfulness, but yeah, I think that's a part of learning. I think it's very important to be mindful of that. You know.
Mindful that you weren't mindful.
Yep. Mindful that you weren't mindful. Yeah, I think it's very important, because then the next time something like that or something similar to that will happen, hopefully, you know, we will, you know, the mindfulness will kick in. Yeah. I look at, and mindfulness can be kicked on and off like that too. You know, especially if somebody's in the newer stages of using it or learning about it, you know, working with it. But I always looked at mindfulness as like, you know how you feel after your meditation practice. Like if it was a good meditation, we feel light, you know, we feel like we accomplished something, hopefully. Does anybody feel like that? Yeah. And it stays with you for a while. But it can fade away. I remember, you know, meditating in the morning and getting up and going to a job. And all the way to the job, to go to work, I felt that, what I called mindfulness. It stayed, you know, like that feeling of spirituality. Been using that word a lot lately for some reason, spirituality, but maybe the right word is mindfulness, you know. So I would feel mindful, you know, all the way to work, but I noticed that it would fade. And then I found different ways to practice at work, practiced in my lunch break, and different ways to build it up again, so that mindfulness, it was really a feeling, like a sensation in the body, could stay with me throughout the day. It was just a kind of an interesting part of my practice, you know, that I could do that. And a lot of it kind of stemmed from how I would kind of look at other people. You know, I'd be driving to work, and how I looked at other people, you know, sitting in their car, you know, see somebody sitting in their car, and what was I thinking? You know, was I thinking, oh, you know, there's a, you know, looks like that guy is not going to work, or he wants to go to work, or you know, looks like this guy, you know, why is this guy driving a car like that? I mean, this is just examples, you know, those kinds of things. Or seeing somebody walking down the sidewalk and noticing them and looking at them, and what is that inner dialogue that's happening within the mind? You know, so if we're mindful, and mindfulness is being able to pick up on stuff like that, but also mindfulness is noticing what that inner dialogue is, and noticing what we're saying about, you know, that inner commentary about that person or walking. And it's not only people, but it's everything. But we can work a lot with people, like we always do. You know, we're creatures that human, you know, have other human interaction all the time, and so we can practice mindfulness when we're interacting with other people. You know, a lot. I mean, it's a very important part for us. And so, not necessarily in the dialogue, but how we see people. And then, and maybe that's one of the reasons why I would get to work and open up the door, and there'd be people there, start conversing with people, and before long I knew that mindfulness, felt like mindfulness, would be gone. And I thought, darn it, you know, how do I hang on to that?
Get rid of people.
Get rid of the people. Yeah.
Work alone.
Yeah. Go back home and meditate. Right. But it was really to. I found that to actually kind of pump that mindfulness back into me was to do a small meditation during my lunch break. Either go to a little park or go into my car and do a meditation during that lunch break, and then it would stay with me for longer, and then I could after work I would do another short meditation, and then I realized that I could, with those kinds of practices, I could keep it with me, throughout the day. Being mindful throughout the day is quite an achievement, really. But first of all, we have to have a clear understanding of what it is, because there's so many definitions, so many different ways to define it. And I always encourage everybody to have their own definition, of what it is, to come up with your own. And because it is different for everybody, but it can be a sensation in the body. It's like a realization. It can be awareness. It can, be a part of consciousness, how some people see consciousness, or like even different layers of consciousness, like, something like this. It could be the mind, whenever we feel as if we have some work to do in the area of spirituality. There's that shining that light of awareness on, what we need, what we would like. And so mindfulness can be both our formal meditation practice, and it can also be looked at as a byproduct of our practice. But it is something that is very, very important, for our growth, if we want to grow in the right direction anyway. So you said you found a Mahayana group in
No,
or not necessarily?
I think, yeah, my brothers found some, like Pema Chodron.
Yeah.
But it's like Zen, right? I mean, I think is she Zen?
No, she's Tibetan Buddhism, Tibetan Buddhist. Yeah.
Maybe there was another one. I think there's something that's similar to Zen there too. But
There was.
I can look up some.
Yeah, there was some Zen. I drove by a Zen center several times when I've been out that way.
Yeah.
Kind of up in a hill. I don't really remember where it's
Yeah,
at,
there
but
might be stuff even outside of it, but hopefully
Yeah,
I'll
this-
find a local set.
yeah. There are some.
Maybe you could start one. If there's none.
You can always start one. Yeah, you can always start something. But yeah, there's things out there. Definitely, there's things out there. I think there might even be a like a spiritual community, or maybe several of them out there. We talked about that earlier, where people live together in like a hippie commune, that kind of thing.
Start one of those.
Yeah, you could start one of those. But anyway, again, we wish you the best. And I guess there probably won't be any tears, and we'll start tears of sorrow and happiness for you after you leave. So we got a few things coming up. If you are not, if I don't have your email address, please make sure I get it. You can just write it on the sheet here, and because I'm going to be sending a newsletter out this week, and that'll keep everybody informed. So if I don't have your email, if you never received anything from me, make sure I have that before you leave. So thank you, everybody, and we will see you next week, if not before. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're losing all these long-time members, huh?
Yeah.